Okay, well, welcome back to our part four in our five-part series around the cloud adoption framework and building out our different environments. I think we've had I can't believe we're at actually part four already. We've actually been on this journey. We've covered off in part one, going through just that cloud adoption framework introduction. We did some demos and showed you kind of some ideation around what could potentially be built using a very simple kind of service catalog. Part two, we kind of spent our time with Jeff going into the landing zones and really kind of unpacking that landing zone and kind of how we then pipe that into kind of some of your DevOps and CI/CD pipelines as well. And so we got a very high level view around pipelines there. Part three, we spent our time with going through kind of operations and management. And really kind of spent some time with Vlad talking through that management and operations and the operations pieces of it. And now in part four, we're going to be spending time with Dave Bernison. So I'm really happy to have him here. We're going to be walking through kind of building out Azure pipelines and or at least GitHub pipelines and GitHub Actions and so on. And so we'll kind of walk through some of that. And I trust I haven't kind of made a mess on any of the language. So Dave, kind of keep me true at any point here. So
yep, absolutely.
We'll talk to the introduction of DevOps. Just what is DevOps? For many of us, we know it. I want to make sure that we bring a lot of those folk who are new to this topic. We bring them on this journey. We're going to talk a little bit about the Microsoft story, how we've kind of evolved, and I think this is a fascinating story, especially as you think about us as an organization having to transition from delivering products that used to come out every 3 to 5 years to that 30, 60, 90-day cadence. And so that in itself is just a phenomenal change in velocity, which DevOps has really helped us kind of get to that point. We'll talk about Azure DevOps and GitHub, and then Dave's going to actually walk us through some of the new capabilities that have just been released within GitHub. In terms of building out GitHub Actions and kind of that your whole CI/CD. So really exciting topic for today. We're going to get into the weeds. As usual, we'll start off with a little bit of a kind of recap, talking about for those of us that might just be joining this conversation for the first time. Everything that we're doing is anchored around the adoption framework. We've got this really deep framework that we've built, which actually helps customers go on this journey from building out your business plan to kind of making sure that the landing zone and your environment is truly ready and up and running, through to how we actually build out workloads and patterns and manage and operate that. And then ultimately, we'll finish up in part five, which is we will talk about well architected. So taking the architecture of an application and then using the well architected methodology to optimize and iterate on that app and make sure that workload and make sure that it's meeting the requirements of security and cost optimization and so on. Now, throughout this entire framework and the way that we build out applications and build out software, DevOps is actually a key part of it. Right from, and I'll show you some tools and that we've built right from the early stages of kind of looking at the business plan, using using DevOps as a product and Azure DevOps as a product to help you on your projects, right the way through to being able to drop that code in and actually stand up your environments, do kind of policies through code, as well as then kind of thinking about those workloads that you're wanting to build. And so if you cast your mind back to the very first session we did, where you saw me create a basic web app just through a self-service portal. So this no-code kind of Office forms, connecting that to our Azure DevOps, using Power Automate to do the business logic and the transferring of that logic from form into ADO, creating a work item and a release, and that release then provisioning and creating those assets on Azure. We're going to step you through today how you can actually build out something very similar using GitHub Actions. And so these tools are just common across the entire framework and entire model, and making sure that we've got the right principles. So before we, as we jump in, I want to make sure that we just level set on, what is DevOps, and how do we kind of think about DevOps? And a lot of the times we get caught up in the DevOps as the product, or just the piece of technology that's going to enable us, as opposed to really that union of people, process, and products, and bringing all of that together to really and truly kind of streamline the way that we actually delivering technology, delivering solutions, or actually just building kind of building assets, or even gathering feedback from customers and interacting and iterating on that. One of the best kind of stories that I've seen us internally at Microsoft apply this is having the ability to actually use use DevOps within the docs content. And so today you can actually go in, you can put in pull requests, and that goes into a process where we can then iterate and view the content that's in. So if you find something that is potentially erroneous or not quite right, you could actually put in a request to kind of change or update that article, and that goes through a set of folk, and that and kind of gets approved and applied. And so we see some of that happening, where it's great. It's a great way to connect these folk that traditionally have sat in the back end we don't have access to. You think about your engineers, and how do we now connect that feedback from customers and be able to iterate in a very rapid fire manner. And so as you can see on that continuous delivery and that central point, really being able to say, hey, how do I build and test my applications, moving towards a much tighter cadence. In traditional style development, you probably would have had a build engineer and then a test engineer, and that's fairly contentious, right? So your build engineer builds something out, sends it to the test guy. The test guy comes back and says, hey, this thing's broken. That goes back and forth between the two of them. And what we want to do is we want to try to simplify and move through that process in a much quicker fashion. So how do we get your test releases and your working in a way that your engineers can throw things into that test pool, get the results? We kind of go in and do the deployment in a simple way, and then from that operations, we're not asking somebody to actually, both when you think about deployment operations, you're not asking somebody to go and provision and procure and deploy and throw it in. We should be able to go through those release pipelines and get it stood up in the right way. And then as we go through that, QA and production environments, you have your rules that get applied. And then on this ongoing monitoring, learning, planning, tracking, ensuring that we are meeting the requirements of the performance of the app, as well as requirements of our customers and our end users, and then bringing that back into that cycle of learning and developing and coding and releasing again. And so
a couple of points I'll throw in there, Wayne, is it's very explicit that we put people first in that definition. There's so many times you can be using all the latest and greatest tools that Gartner and Forrester and everybody else is recommending. You can be doing Agile, Scrum, Kanban, whatever it is, but if you don't have developers, testers, operations, program manager, if you don't have everybody in the same boat rowing in the same direction, you're still not going to be successful. You talk about in the past, you throw it over the wall to operations to install in production or something. But if operations didn't first tell developers, hey, we've got some new security requirements, you've got to take care of this as part of the application, it's gonna blow up the first time it goes into production there, or vice versa. If developers add use of a new library or something, and there's some new dependencies that are required for production, they need to be communicating that with operations. But yeah, you get everybody working together, those things just go much more smoothly and much more quickly.
Boom, you are absolutely spot on. And I think that point around people is critical. And that's why when you think about when we take this back to the adoption framework, that whole front end of the adoption framework around strategy and plan, where I see customers really getting bogged down, is on that organizational alignment. What does our organization of the future look like? Whereas today, if I take my traditional IT model and my traditional IT way of operating, and I just try to apply that in cloud practices, apply cloud practices, I'm kind of probably going to just do the same thing, but I'm just thinking about this more in the data center in the sky. As I think about that model and we think about changing up and how do people interact and operate, and then we have the processes to support, you really then strive for that agility and get that velocity going that you're looking for. So it's a super critical point, is just making sure that we really get those teams and people aligned and understanding how we can bring all of this together.
Yep. You want everybody working towards the same objectives and everything from the product level all the way down to the individual team level. Yep.
So then, at the technology level, there's two products that Microsoft kind of talks about. There's Azure DevOps and there's GitHub. And we're going to talk a little bit about the journey that we've been on as we go through this, and kind of and then give some indication around, hey, what is coming. You'll see where some of our investments are going. Dave, you've got a great story around kind of your 8-track. Let's hear it. I love analogies.
Yeah, so this is all about developing on the cloud these days and everything. And what this is about is kind of drawing an analogy between the way we consume music and how that has evolved, and comparing that to how building out applications has evolved. I think I'm probably the last kid in America that put an 8-track player in my 78 Nova when I was 16 years old, kind of a thing. But we look at the evolution of music. We went from albums to 8-tracks to cassettes, and then when we got to compact discs, CDs, we were able to have these multiple CD changers. You could have a 6 CD changer in your car, and I kind of liken that to virtual machines. There was a big step up in technology when you could have dozens of virtual machines on a single piece of hardware, and virtual machines could come and go, and man, that was great. It made it a lot easier. So yeah, even in music, if you had that 400 CD changer at home, you could play all kinds of music. But when we look at to where things have evolved today with cloud services and everything, now I can simply say, hey, I like that song, play more songs like that. And those may be songs that I've never heard before. And that's enabled by everything being out there on the cloud, and all this music that we don't even know is out there is accessible to us. And you couple that with the machine learning and the intelligence that's built into these music services, that enables that. Same way when we look at going from virtual machines, yeah, you could have all of these virtual machines and minimize the amount of hardware you have and everything, but you really can't take advantage of the intelligence that's out there in Azure services like the Vision API or speech to text recognition and things like that until your applications are out there running on the cloud in a modern framework and everything. So think about that as you're developing your applications. Are you really putting it out there in a way that's going to enable you to take advantage of all of the latest and greatest technology by just simply plugging it into your application?
Yeah, I love that story, Dave, because we talk a lot about creating patterns and what is the repeatable IP. And I think we've mentioned in this series as we've gone through it that, hey, if you do something once, make sure look to code that up, write it into code, because you want to be able to reuse and replay that on a regular basis. And so if there's a common pattern that is coming through in your organization, let's get it. Use that automation capability that you've built up as part of your teams. Let's get them kind of thinking about building out those common reusable pieces of IP, and then we're going to use them in those in those pipelines and so on. And so really kind of shared knowledge as well also helps drive the organization forward.
Oh, absolutely. And we could even get into a discussion on inner source then too, as you automate it, build it out, making it available to other business units. Maybe there's something that here at Microsoft, the Office team does as far as managing users or whatnot. And that might be something that the Bing team or even the Xbox team could use. Well, it could be put out there as a piece of inner source and shareable across the company without it becoming something that's out there in the public space. So now you're leveraging the best work of teams all across the company, not just leveraging the work of the 10 or 12 people that might be on your specific team.
Yeah, and specifically focused on IT. And when we think about experimentation and some of the tenets that we've been driving that we drive with customers is build out an environment so you can have experimentation. Get some of those best ideas coming out from either those citizen developers or those groups out there that are building applications. It doesn't always have to come from IT, but if we enable them in the right way with the right controls and the right governance, we can take a lot of learning and we can feed that back into the organization.
Absolutely.
Now, having said that, right, it's like, okay, so there's a great vision, right? So we know where we want to get to. What does this journey look like? We've been on this journey internally at Microsoft for a long time, and there's tons of videos out there. And in fact, I think Abel Wang tells a great story around how we've adopted kind of DevOps and what happened in terms of as we've evolved and as we've built. And you build these pipelines and you build these releases, and they don't work at first, and then they fail, and you have to, and that's not a bad thing, because you know what you need to fix. And so it's like going and working out in the gym. You are stretching and kind of putting that muscle under stress, and then when you recover and go back a couple of days later, it's a little stronger, and so on and so forth. And you think about the same sort of principle that we want to apply here, as this notion of MVP. So Dave, as you kind of look at the Azure DevOps journey, do you want to talk a little bit about how you've seen that kind of evolving?
Absolutely. So yeah, you think back to that 2010, 2012 timeframe. The product then was called Team Foundation Server, and it wasn't even available on the cloud. You had to set it up on your own servers and maintain it yourself and everything. And we would release major updates to that about every 2 to 3 years, and we'd release service packs kind of in between, but no more frequently than every 3 or 4 months, if not 6 months. And typically when we would put out a new release, customers would say, hey, that's great, I'm excited for all these new features and everything, but you know what, I'm going to hold off and wait until you ship service pack 1 so that I know that you've worked out a lot of the bugs, a lot of kinks and everything. And we knew that just wasn't going to be good for our customers to be on that kind of a cadence. Plus, excuse me, with the evolution of cloud native applications and software as a service and all that, in 2012 there you see we had the Visual Studio Team Services preview. So we said, hey, we can actually deploy this on the cloud and you just sign up for it as a service. So then we were able to really pick up momentum, because we could take all that maintenance away from the users. We would deploy updates automatically and everything. And that was a big step in our journey. Another big step was the creation of One ES, and that's our one engineering system. That's Microsoft's center of excellence for software development. Now, yeah, Azure DevOps team has had substantial amount of input to that, but there's input coming from all over the company there, and we take some of the best and brightest people working in One ES so that they can come up with whether it's the best practices or whether it's adding on tooling on top of Azure DevOps and things like that, so that every development team can benefit from it. It's not just we're not just keeping those talents to one team or another, but sharing those talents all across the company. And so in 2014, we were releasing about half. So we got on to 3-week sprints, and we were releasing about half a dozen new features per sprint. But then you fast forward to 2019, and at that point, we were releasing couple of dozen new features with every sprint, and the quality had gotten so much better because of the way we've adopted things like automated testing, the way we restructured our teams. We talked about people working together. We evolved to where, rather than having silos of program managers, developers, testers, operations, we created feature teams, and each feature team has the capabilities of program management, engineering, testing, operations built into that team. In those feature teams, let's say it's a team that's responsible for an area within Azure Boards, they own those features from the time the user story is conceived until it's been deployed to production and running in production, and we're gathering telemetry that we know things are running good. We're not, performance is good. We know that users we're gaining more and more users, or users are staying with us, and all of that. And yeah, so that a key thing here to take away is, yes, we made a lot of changes. We adopted the cloud. We adopted, automated everything. But this was a journey. This wasn't something where, we did a bunch of planning. I think one of the next major holidays coming up here would be Memorial Day. So, it's not like we did a bunch of planning and said, okay, we're going to shut everything down over that Memorial Day weekend, and we'll have our Delta Force team come in and set everything up. And then, hey, the Tuesday after Memorial Day, we're all doing DevOps. It's not that kind of a thing. It's a journey, and there's incremental improvements along the way, and there's failures along the way, and you have to learn from those failures and move forward, and things like that. So a lot of great.
That's a lot of that, and that's a lot of that learning culture that you build, that you got to build into the organization. It's fail fast, learn, adapt, and keep moving.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's just such a great story, and I think it just sets the context and sets the tone of that. Hey, this isn't this, show up on day one, think about it, day two, we deploy and we're up and running it, and it's an evolution that we're going to continue to go through. Talk us through a little bit about this kind of adopting this growth mindset and how that's kind of really played into, I guess the stories and the work that you do on a daily basis.
Yeah, so the growth mindset, that even comes from our CEO, Satya Nadella. And that's talking about things like, don't be afraid to fail fast and learn from those failures. So on the next go round, the next iteration, you're getting better. And when you do that time and time again, you're just getting better and better. And it's being comfortable in knowing that you don't have to necessarily know everything when you're put on a project, but you're going to learn, and you're going to continually improve, and you're going to keep learning as you move forward, and all of that. And I think that's given people a lot more comfort and freedom in attacking tough problems, and that you get out of that paralysis by analysis mode, trying to figure everything out up front, before you tackle it. But yeah, start out with that minimally viable product, and then we talk about creating a culture of customer obsession. We take a lot of input from our customers. Almost every application now in Microsoft, you'll see the little smiley face where you can go click on that, and you can report a problem or make a suggestion or see what others have suggested and vote on those suggestions that are out there. That's input that we take. But when we look at all that input and everything, we'll say, okay, let's get something working and running and usable by users out there, and then learn from that and build upon that to make it better and better. Again, not getting into paralysis by analysis by trying to think everything through, every possible situation and everything, because you never really know until it's out there, running in production. And then aligning on shared objectives. A key thing here at Microsoft now, pretty much all teams, and I think you talk about this, is looking at objectives and key results, rather than saying, hey, we want to just focus on lowering the number of bugs in the software, or, hey, we want to pick up our velocity from 10 story points to 15 story points over the course of the next sprint. No, the objectives we look at are things like, we want to grow a strong and happy customer base, or we want to make Power BI the world's premier data analytics service, or something like that. So we're measuring outcomes rather than outputs, and it starts at the product level. So in this case, let's take Office, for example. We'll say, we want Office Suite to be, the world's best set of collaboration tools and everything. And then it comes down to like the Word team and the Excel team, and they take that and say, okay, well, how can we contribute to that? What outcomes do we want that line up with that? And then it filters down, even more specifically, maybe to the Excel charts team or whatever, and they've got, they'll lay out their objectives and figure out what key results they're going to measure to ensure that they're meeting their objectives, then the service level objectives, and the product level objectives. So that gets everybody aligned to a more singular North Star. And again, coming back to people, that way you get everybody in the same boat, rowing in the same direction, rowing towards that same North Star.
Yeah, the OKR conversation is a fascinating one, and one that is starting to evolve more and more. And as you said, it's kind of spreading its wings across many different organizations, as well as kind of internally at Microsoft. We've actually even gone ahead and built some articles and written articles around OKRs and how that aligns to some of the outcomes. And so I'll give a bit of a show and tell later on where all this is kind of represented within the adoption framework, as we go through that. You want to jump in and just talk a little bit about kind of this progress and kind of how you see things evolving?
Yeah, and this is, we definitely saw this here at Microsoft in the Azure DevOps team, but this also comes out of DORA and the State of DevOps report, where they'd sent out surveys to thousands of developers, program managers, operations people, and asked them things like, how much are you doing automation? Are you doing agile or Scrum? Are you communicating with customers and all that, to figure out, our companies low performing, medium performing, or high performing DevOps companies? And this is just kind of a summary from all of that data, all of those studies about, what somebody can kind of expect if they want to go on that journey of going from a low performing DevOps company to a high performing DevOps company. And yeah, as you get into this and you learn about DevOps, you'll identify some quick wins, and you'll learn about the importance of automation and everything. But then as you realize that, yeah, go ahead and reveal the next point there. You realize just how much automation you really need, or maybe, just how little test coverage you may have. And that reveals this mountain of technical debt and blockers and things that you need to work through. But you need to really stay diligent in working through all of that technical debt, and getting teams to work together and all of that, because in the end, then this will this relentless improvement work leads to excellence and high performance, and that'll get you to the point where you'll be able to deliver dozens of features in every 2 or 3 week sprint that you may have. Or, nowadays some teams aren't even working really in sprints. They release features when they're ready. That's kind of how we work at GitHub. And yeah, the velocity and the quality and everything picks up when you stay the course and work through all of this.
Fantastic.
So yeah, I know Sam Guckenheimer used to say, getting clean is highly manual, and then staying clean requires dependable automation. So yeah, automation is a key point in all of this, and we're going to, continue to talk about that here.
Fantastic. Yeah, so let's kind of talk it through, and so we've given a lot of the theory, we've given the background. I think some experiences of where we've seen this working, some of the gotchas and expectations. I'm going to kind of take you through, as we've done with the other sessions, around a little bit of a show and tell. I want to show you kind of some of the patterns that we've built within Azure DevOps. I'm going to talk you through where this content resides within, in our OKRs and various operating model. And I think that operating model ties so closely to what Dave is talking about with the people focus, and how we're going to think about building and enabling our teams to write great software. So I think it's absolutely core. I do want to take you through and show you where you can actually do a lot of this learning and self-paced learning as well, both on the Azure side as well as in the GitHub side. And then Dave's actually going to take us through a really cool walkthrough of building a release pipeline for app service, and kind of showing a little bit around the GitHub Actions and getting started. And then we've got a much bigger kind of parts unlimited example, which he will kind of show you as well, the more complex workloads. So let's get after it. Let's have a look. I'm going to start off with the adoption framework, as always. aka.ms/adopt brings you into kind of the page. There's tons of content that we've got, 1,700 pages. Download it as a PDF if you want. I don't see the 1,700 pages as a measure of success. Once again, this is really it is complex, right? There's a lot of good stuff here that we keep writing articles, and there's new things coming up all the time, and we'll continue to add to it. First thing, just from a navigation, if you jump into kind of the business outcomes under strategy, you'll see everything that we've spoken around in terms of objectives and key results. We've actually written up an article here, just talking a little bit about the principles of OKRs. What are some of the things that you should be thinking about? How do we drive alignment and accountability in an organization? We've even given some examples of OKRs that you can actually take a read through here. And then, just we've got next steps and kind of how you think about this, and then who are some of the partners that we work with in the space as well. But it's a really, really important part of this journey that you go through just by establishing some of those key principles. The other one that I do want to call out is really that thinking a little bit about that operating model and how you actually get yourselves stood up. So we've got some really good content that's come through. When you look at the operating model and you think about how what does old style operating models look like, and let me just get you to some common ones that we have now. So from a decentralized operations to centralized to enterprise ops to distributed operations, lots of goodness around how we think about the people and the structure and what is it that we're trying to do. Now, we're not saying one operating model is better than the other, but go in with kind of eyes wide open that how we're going to be operating and running these things. If we run in a centralized centralized approach where we are in this kind of the strategic priority is control, let's think about how DevOps will play a role there. This is probably going to be contained to that IT team. I think to truly gain benefit, you want to make sure that we want to get a lot of people and get a lot of those ideas and that experimentation coming in. Think about those different types of operating models as well as we move forward. So tons of great content and assets that have been set up here. The other one that I want to kind of call out, and we'll drop these links in as well, just aka.ms/adopt/plan/generator. This takes us to a couple of these quick starts that we've actually built. So for many organizations today, it's like, how do I get going on my my Azure DevOps journey, or what are the patterns that are out there that I can start to use? There's some really cool things that have been done. So like here's some learning templates that you can use. So if you've chosen Azure DevOps as your platform, you can use some of these templates. If you could also kind of put some of these projects out to CSVs where you can actually just see the work items that need to be done to import into other tools. But here's some of the templates that are created. We've actually even got a full-blown there's a DevOps Labs, a Microsoft Learn, but also then a full-blown cloud adoption framework kind of set of patterns and templates that we've done. So everything from defining your strategy, your plan, and getting your environment stood up and your landing zones ready with the right governance. What is the project, right the way through to if you were doing a WVD project or at least a knowledge mining project, we've got those. So here's kind of just a quick sneak preview of what we do within these projects. Set out the work items, all the things that you should be covering. Similarly, here's one for knowledge mining, and within the knowledge mining one, I'll just give a quick shout out here that a lot of this content is actually plugged into GitHub as well. So you've actually got code sitting there which you can now go and build into a pipeline for your build. And then finally, docs.microsoft.com/learn is our premier landing place for all things learning content. And so I would encourage you to continue to come back to this. You'll see that you'll be able to go. I've just went into products and browsed all learning paths, and bringing up things like Azure as well as GitHub content is all up here. And so, whether you are, I did a quick search on DevOps. So if you look at all the learning paths and you look at all the content that's available within this, I would highly encourage you to take a look at that. And hey, how do we automate DevOps process by using GitHub apps? So it's all here and available for you in one easy to use place. Plus, go ahead and sign in, and you can create your own collections and actually even share those collections out with friends and other work colleagues to say, here's some content that I've been doing. And so once you sign in, you kind of get your little badge. You can go in and see your collections and share them out. So I'm a big fan of what's in the learning platform. Pretty much, my single place to go when I'm looking for just new ideas and I'm trying to kind of understand something. So it's a great place to go. So Dave, with that, I've covered off a lot. I think we've been going on for about 40 minutes now. Let's jump in and see if we can kind of start to build out a release pipeline using Github Actions. If you want to take the screen, it's all yours.
Absolutely. Let me just kind of get on my starting point screen. There we go.
And I'm excited. I'm excited for this. I think it's just so good to kind of see this stuff all come together and make it, making it real.
All right, so I'm going to do kind of the fast forward version of this, but we'll cover off on everything here. So what I have is I've got a nice little .NET Core app, and if we run this thing, it's just an app that allows us to look at some information about GitHub Actions. So yep, just running this locally right now, but yeah, you can see we've got the home page, the about page. You can dive in more on GitHub Actions, contact our sales team, and stuff like that. But I want to get that out there on Azure. And right now, if I go out and look at my Azure web app, I've already got that set up and deployed and everything, but we don't have anything out there yet. If we look at the deployment center here, it's going to say there's no deployments or anything, just kind of prove all this out and everything. If we look at our overview here, it says, hey, this is just a placeholder. The web app is out there, but there's actually nothing there. So this is just a placeholder page. So I took that code and I put it up there. So here's the actual code and everything out there. So the next step is I want to set up my CI/CD pipeline, but I'm going to do it with GitHub Actions. We've evolved GitHub Actions to the point where it can do continuous delivery as well as continuous integration. And we've got some great ways to help you get started here. So yeah, when I first go to my Actions tab within my repo, I see some different suggestions here. Yep, there's web app, but I've got a .NET web app, so I want to start with a little something different. So I'm going to go down to continuous integration here. There's .NET. Oh, perfect. There's the .NET right there. So we are going to say set up this app. So yeah, we see it does the basics, right? It does our restore, it does our build, but I want to give this a little different name here. So copy and paste just to keep it easy on myself. So there's our YAML file name, and we're going to name this build and deploy app. So hey, it looks like this gave us something we can start with, but yeah, I can pull other actions and things in from the marketplace, and we'll talk about that as this is building and running here. So initial commit, and I'm not going to worry about typos, just to prove this is live or this is real. So now if I go over here to actions, now we see we can see what's happening while this is running and everything. And I can even go in and see the steps that it's going through. So yeah, it's doing the restore, doing the build and everything. And let's see, I think this will just take a couple of seconds. Oh no, looks like we've got an error. So what happened here? We look at our error. It says, oh, hey, you got to specify a project. So yeah, while that template was a good start, it didn't quite give us everything that we needed. So we can go back into our workflow file. And I actually have the full workflow that we need in here. So we'll just paste in the changes, and then I can take advantage of the preview to show what we're doing here. I'm going to set up some variables because I want to be a good developer. I don't want to have a bunch of hard-coded stuff in there, but there's our solution. So on our on our restore, on our build, we want to be referencing that solution and everything, and same with our test and everything. So let's make this one actually work this time. So we'll let that run, and again, I can go over here to actions, and everything. And, we could follow along while that's working and everything. But while that's building, I'm gonna actually kind of dive into the next step. So if I look at my workflow file now, the thing we've built our application, but now we want to get ready to deploy it. And so we want to look at pulling in an action that's out there in the marketplace. And you can see it's giving me just some suggestions and things here, but it's not just Azure. If you're using like Terraform for your infrastructure as code, HashiCorp has supplied an action there. Or let's say you're using Sonar for all of your analytics and things like that as part of your code. Sonar Source has built that, but you also see there's a number of individuals that have contributed to this. So we're taking that open source approach to supplying everything you need for actions. Now, again, the thing I'm most interested in now, we want to deploy to Azure, but look at everything you can do for Azure. Kubernetes, machine learning, resource manager templates, etc. There's I believe it's over 75 Azure specific actions out there right now. But what I want to do is I want to say, okay, I want to add in deployment steps for web apps. So it gives us, kind of, I could just copy that and drop that in there. But let me go check out the full listing here to make sure I know everything that I need to do here. So, I go through this and it's giving me lots of good information. And one thing I need to do is make sure I'm taking care of my dependencies and everything. So it's saying something about, hey, I need to get my web publish profile in there. So what I want to do is go over to my app here, and let's make sure we're in the right app. Yes, we are. We're going to get that web publish profile, and we're going to copy that information. And what we're going to do is, we could put that out there as a file in source control, but you really don't want to do that. You don't want to have any kind of secrets or anything in source control. So I'm going to go back over here to my repo, go into my settings, and say I need to set up a secret. So I'm going to say new repo secret, drop that in there, and then I want to make sure I get the right name for that. So there we go. So now we've added that secret. All right, so a little time has passed here. Let's go back and make sure that last action ran. So we built and everything. We know we're all good here. So yeah, let's go back in and edit that file. We've set up our dependencies and everything. So now I can pull in the steps that I need for my deployment, drop that code in here. When we look at the changes that we're doing, you'll see we added a couple new variables and things so we can reference our app name. But the key things to look at is I added the publish step. So I've got a package that I can use for deployment. And then I'm calling that Azure web deployment action and taking that package that we just created. I'm going to use that publish profile to make that connection between GitHub Actions and Azure and all of that. And so let's do this first deployment. All right, so that's all great. That's all well and good. Now we're building and we're deploying. So yeah, we can follow along and see what's happening and everything here, but we've got this all inside of a build stage. I actually want to make this smart and say, hey, we want to have a build stage and we want to have a separate deployment stage as well. We want to deploy to our production environment. So while that's building, the next step that I'm going to do here is I'm going to go over, and in settings, we've got environments. So I'm going to say I want to create a production environment. Make sure we get that spelled right so that things will work. All right, so we're going to configure that environment. And the main thing I'm going to do right now is I'm going to add myself as a reviewer. I don't want it to just blindly deploy to production. I only want to deploy to production when we know that we're at a point in time where it's safe to do that deployment. So we'll save that protection rule. Now, another thing I could do, I'm just not going to take the time to do it now, but when we look at the secrets, so I had defined the Azure Web App Publish profile here as a repository level secret. I could move that up to an environment secret. And in fact, when you have multiple environments, let's say you have a QA environment, a staging environment, and a production environment, then you're going to want to store those secrets at that environment level rather than the repository level. All right, so let's go and see, did our action complete? Sure enough, our action completed. So now if I go out here and now I'm looking again at my web app, I can go under Deployment Center here, and we'll see that there's reference to that deployment here. It actually drops in a couple of entries. So yep, today's Friday the 22nd. There's the reference to the deployment. And remember, I explicitly left this page open. So now if I just simply go up here and refresh this guy, we should see our web app. Hey, there we go. Okay, so our first deployment is successful. But now let's change that code so that we drop in the management of the environment, and we have that approval in the middle there. So again, I've got that code ready to go. So I just need to go over to this file and drop in all of these changes. And when we look at the differences here, you'll see that the key change is, okay, I made just a little tweak to publish, but now I'm going to upload the build artifacts back to GitHub, because when we're deploying to the production environment, it's actually going to be running on a separate agent, because it may be a few minutes, it may be a couple of days between when we build and when we deploy. So now we're running on another instance of our runner. So we have to download the artifacts to that instance of the runner, and then we'll deploy the website. So you can see there's just a small tweak there as well. So let's start that commit. So with our environment. And while that's running, so we've got a very simple scenario here, but I want to jump over to another scenario that is a little more robust and everything. So if we go, do I have it here? Nope, I'm going to go back up to my organization and go to Parts Unlimited. So in this scenario, I've got my Parts Unlimited application that we're building and deploying, and I've got this totally integrated with Azure DevOps and everything, but I really want to focus on the actions here. And if we look at the last run, and you'll notice I've actually got multiple workflows in here. I'll talk about that as well. But if we go into this last run, yeah, we can see we had it separated out into our CI environment. We had our development environment, and Actions is even smart enough to say, hey, here's the URL that you deployed to. And it's currently sitting in our QA environment. And now here's an example of that manual approval that we're looking at. If I scroll down, I can see the approval that I did earlier for the QA environment. But the user experience here is, I can go in here and say, yep, we are ready to deploy to prod, and as soon as I hit that, it's going to do that deployment and everything. But if we go into this workflow file, I want to point out some of the other things that you can do inside of a workflow, because that example I had was very, very simple. So one area I want to focus, so here's building. This is just a .NET framework app, so the build's a little different. But since I'm using ARM templates, Azure Resource Manager, to provision my web app, my database, my application insights, and everything. And one of the things I can do inside of here is I can actually validate my ARM template. So right inside of my build, I'm running through the process of making sure that the syntax and everything in that ARM template is correct and everything. So I'm doing more than just build and test as a way to verify everything. And as we go down here, we'll notice as we get into the different stages, we've got logic in here that says, if this is a push, we want to do our deployments, because we set up our triggers to work on both deployments and pull requests. So right here, we've got push. We've also got pull request. So we don't want to deploy on every pull request, just the actual merges into our main branch. And so we can be smart. We can have, be smart about our logic. Even when we get into our development stage, yes, we've got our ARM template processing and everything here, but I'm kind of leveraging the cached version of the ARM template, so I know I'm only going to rerun the ARM templates if I know those ARM templates changed. So yeah, you can have the multiple environments, you can have the manual approvals, you can build lots of intelligence in here. So with a single file, I can use it for both pull request validation, and I can use it for my main build and deployment and everything. And I can build in smarts about running steps only when we need to, only when certain files have changed, and all of that. So we've really built this out to be a much more robust continuous delivery system in addition to being a continuous integration system. Okay, so here again, going back to the live demo, here's our review in production. So we can say go for it. And while that's deploying, I'm gonna point out some of the other whoops, where did my, here we go. Point out some of the other integrations, because I have this guy integrated with Azure DevOps, and there's so much more that you can do with GitHub Actions in addition to CI/CD workflows. I've actually built out a workflow that every time a pull request is created, it creates a mirror of that in Azure DevOps, a pull request work item type. Now, the beauty of that is that I can come in here and say, GitHub has something called Dependabot, and Dependabot goes through and looks at everything you're pulling in from npm, NuGet, et cetera, all the open source packages that you're pulling in. And if Dependabot creates a pull request, it's a pull request that says, hey, you've got a security issue in one of your open source packages and you need to fix that. Well, by mirroring those pull requests, I can then tag those pull requests. And when I look at my Azure boards, now I've got those pull requests. So, here's just a general pull request from when we make feature changes and everything. But here's a pull request that's been tagged as a security alert. So I can couple this with the customization rules that we have in Azure boards and everything and say, hey, wait, we've got a security alert here. Let's reprioritize that work and make sure that we address that before we finish any feature work. So yeah, going back into GitHub, then I can see, yeah, here's that security vulnerability right here. This is what we need to fix. But if it goes deeper than that. It's not just security on the open source packages that we're pulling in, but if we look at the last pull request for the last feature change that I did and look at the files changed here, we're going to see it's alerting me to security problems in the code that I've written. So it's saying, hey, this code that you've written here, there's a cross-site issue in there. And if we drill into the details here, it's going to tell me I need to add some additional attributes to my code. Right now, I only have this HTTP post, but to guard against the cross-site vulnerabilities, I need to add that validate anti-forgery. So just a quick deep dive of the integration between Azure boards and GitHub Actions, and showing how you can use GitHub Actions for so much more than just CI/CD. So yeah, I've got my build and deploy, I've got sync pull requests. CodeQL is that process that runs to scan all my code and everything. So check my notes and see if there was anything else we wanted to cover on Wayne. Otherwise, I think I've covered just about everything here. But
you have covered that and some, and I think it's just phenomenal to see how we can kind of, when we truly start to bring those kind of people, process, tech together, we can think about building and we think about automation, be intentional about it. I think we have such a great opportunity to kind of really write great secure code, good apps that we can drive the right velocity, get that agility going, and I think it's just such a good muscle to kind of get within the organization as we go through this. So good job. I think we've seen a lot. I think we've seen kind of GitHub Actions in action. We've seen that connection to Azure DevOps and being able to kind of show some of the ways that we bring the earlier parts of building out that strategy, that plan, getting those people aligned. It does come together and manifest itself well. So
absolutely.
Just I think as we close out, I know that there's a couple of links and a couple of resources that I really want to share. We've got aka.ms/adopt. That's kind of the cloud adoption framework kind of landing page. Go to the generator. That's where you get some of those pre-canned templates that we've built out. Use those for learning. Use those for just seeing what projects. We've built a bunch of these projects for you already within ADO that you can leverage. Look at go through the Learn platform. Check out what we've got on the DevOps learning path, the GitHub learning path. Look at Azure DevOps. I think bring all of these things together, and you choose how we can go out and build them, build out those pipelines and those actions for yourself. GitHub roadmap is a really interesting one, and I would encourage folks to spend some time having a look and seeing what's coming down the pike. This is a public roadmap that we've got up there. And then Dave, we've just released the latest GitHub blog. There was some changes that happened, I guess in the last couple of days. And so there's an article here about working better with automation. We felt that it would be appropriate to share this link out as well, just so that folks can get the latest and greatest of what's going on.
Yeah, a little more on that link. GitHub has been evolving a lot, especially over the last year. It's been about 13, 14 months since we originally introduced GitHub Actions. And part of that blog post covers the changes to actions that have been made in the last year. But when you look through that entire blog post, it kind of goes over all of the changes and advancements that have been made to GitHub in the last year, all the security features that we've added, some of which I showed there, the addition of GitHub Mobile, the addition of GitHub Discussions, even the addition of GitHub Dark Mode. So yeah, that's a great summary of all the changes that have been made to GitHub in about the last year or so.
Well, fantastic. This has been super deep, and I think it's been hugely valuable. Thank you, Dave. As always, you're a scholar and a gentleman to kind of stand up and help us out and share what you're seeing and share your thoughts. Join us again for part 5, where we'll close out. We're going to talk about taking those applications that you've built. How do we now architect, do that ongoing review? We'll be kind of diving into the well-architected methodology, making sure that we kind of really unpack that. You can see how you can leverage within your environments. Dave, any closing thoughts or final thoughts before we let you go?
No, just we've talked about it being a journey, but you know what they say, if you're going to run a marathon, you have to take the first step and just take it one step at a time. So get started on your DevOps journey today, and you'll be amazed at where you're at 6 months or a year from now.
Fantastic. Great. I really appreciate it. Have a great evening, Dave, and thank you all. Speak to you soon.
You too, Wayne. Take care.
Okay.